Hi YouTube, Darth here. I'm kicking off a new thing on my channel where I'll be comparing two sidearms against one another and seeing how they match up. For the inaugural episode, I'm looking at the by now very famous Deagle and the CZ-75. I run both of these weapons without any attachments or sights and talk about my experiences with them. Before I get into any stats, I want to talk about my impressions of both of these weapons coming into this video. Until the spring patch, I had used the Deagle in almost every one of my loadouts. It was a reliable and extremely powerful sidearm. The CZ-75, on the other hand, I'm not sure I had fired more than a magazine of ammo out of it. The CZ-75 got bypassed on my way to higher damage or higher rate of fire weapons like the Deagle or the 93R. Looking at the community favorites, we can see from BF4stats.com that the Deagle is far ahead of the CZ-75 by almost 90,000 kills. Based on my own perspective, I can easily say I've seen the Deagle in the kill feed far more than the CZ-75. But how do these two weapons match up against one another in a stat battle? Let's take a look. The obvious draw of the Deagle is going to be that fantastic 56 maximum damage, inflicting an instant kill on a headshot and a 2 to 3 kill otherwise. But it's important to not overlook the 30 damage of the CZ-75, as this is a far bit better than the other lesser caliber sidearms. It's not quite an M1911 or Compact 45, but it can put a good amount of damage on target, particularly at longer ranges. But it's in the stats that aren't damage where the CZ-75 has it all over the Deagle. First up, the magazine is going to last you longer on the CZ-75. With 13 rounds versus 9, you've got a bit more power to deal with follow-up shots. While the CZ-75 takes more bullets to kill, it's also highly accurate, especially compared to the Deagle. In every way, the recoil of the CZ-75 is superior to the Deagle. It has better upwards and left-right recoil, and most critically, the aiming down sights on the move penalty is almost half of the Deagle. That last point about on the move penalty is important, so I'm going to talk more about it later. But wait, there's more things that the CZ-75 does better. It has better muzzle velocity, its minimum damage drop-off takes longer, and its maximum distance is slightly higher at 570 meters versus 480. And one last thing, the CZ-75 can reload from empty in 1.6 seconds, whereas the Deagle takes a head-crushing 3.2 seconds. This means that the Deagle reloads more slowly than many of the automatic weapons in the game that have 3 times as many rounds, and it's still half the speed of the CZ-75. So reload carefully. What these two weapons come down to is that the Deagle is a maximum damage mega blaster that is well suited to close range, and the CZ-75 is a surprisingly powerful and accurate pistol. So let's concentrate on what the Deagle does best, blasting enemies in half at close range. No doubt you've been killed by the Deagle plenty of times, and I've sworn at Deagle users more than a few times saying something like it's the best primary weapon in the game. There's no denying that this weapon has the ability to instantly kill an enemy with a well-placed or lucky shot at ranges of 15 meters or less. But at the same time, it's surprisingly difficult to get that well-placed shot even at these ranges, especially because you're almost always being challenged by another enemy at the same time. And that's the great Achilles heel of this weapon. Its on-the-move penalty when aiming down sights is absolutely atrocious. Getting that headshot if an enemy has their gun trained on you is going to be exceptionally difficult if you're not willing to stand in place and take the pain. And if you miss, you're dead. I had so much trouble with this weapon after the spring patch, I felt like I had completely fallen off my game. But this video was also the first time where I was using nothing but the Deagle in every situation. I couldn't figure out why whenever I would draw my Deagle on an enemy, it felt like I was shooting at a specter or ghost. Every bullet would seem to miss when it needed to count the most. If I went for headshots, I'd graze their shoulder. If I went for body shots, I might get 1 or 2 into them, but inevitably one of the bullets seemed to go into La La Land. It really came down to the moving ADS penalty, which doesn't apply to hipfire. The only real strategy I could figure that had any chance of working was to hipfire the Deagle and basically not care much about trying to aim. So I had to figure out what happened to this weapon in the spring patch because I clearly remembered it being almost unstoppably better. Lo and behold, nothing had changed in the spring patch, except nearly every other sidearm had gotten better, including the CZ-75. Now, the Deagle did take a hit in an earlier patch, but apparently I hadn't really noticed it until pressing the weapon to the breaking point. So ultimately, what was my takeaway from the Deagle? If you're going to run with this weapon, you'll definitely want to throw on a laser sight and get ready to hipfire this weapon, because if you're under fire, you're not going to be able to pull off that miracle headshot in most circumstances. Unless your name is Ravik. And then in the other corner we have the CZ-75. While it's certainly not the slugger that the Deagle is, I have to say that I had a much easier time when operating this weapon. Particularly because I'm prone to aiming down sights when trying to get a better shot. Even in close quarters, the difference is almost instantaneous. When firing this weapon, you can notice the difference in accuracy versus the Deagle. The CZ-75 is more controllable, fires longer, faster, and straighter than the Deagle. And while the 30 damage output is no 56, the ability to put shots on target under pressure is far more reliable. That's really where it counts, I think, is the under pressure performance of a sidearm. Now, you might get different mileage for your playstyle, but my sidearm is typically coming out to play when I am either out of ammunition or I'm mid-reload and I'm getting rushed. In those circumstances, it should be your last-ditch weapon of choice. Some people prefer maximum damage for high risk, others might like more ammunition being sent down range for panic fire, and I think I fall in the category of having a mix of those two with accuracy. As for loadouts for the CZ-75, I think your sight of choice and the laser would be my preferred setup. If you want to throw on a suppressor at the distances we're talking about, it's not going to impact performance too terribly. But keep in mind that you increase your minimum time to kill by extending that bullet travel time. So, in a sidearm showdown of the Deagle versus the CZ-75, which one do I think is better? Well, it should be pretty obvious by now, but I'm going to give it to the CZ-75. Now, I know there's going to be a few folks shaking their head and grasping their beloved Deagle close, and I want you folks to let me know in the comments below why you prefer the Deagle. For me though, I'm definitely a convert on this one. I think the CZ-75 has the advantage in too many categories to be ignored. It has better accuracy, and particularly on the move accuracy when aiming, which I think is vital and is generally a more forgiving weapon. Now, I like the Magnum's accurate high damage, high risk hand cannons. However, in the case of the Deagle, in the matches I've played recently, when I've needed the Deagle to be accurate, it has simply failed me. But I'd love to hear from you folks. What's your favorite of these two weapons, the Deagle or the CZ-75? Hash it out in the comments below. But before you go, choose 2 sidearms you'd like to see on the next Sidearm Showdown, and I'll review the top comment from this episode. Also, let me know what you'd like to see in the next episode in general. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time, YouTube.